All right, so this video goes over 10.1, which is talking about the midpoint formula. Below here, I have just showed you a example of the midpoint formula and a reminder of what the midpoint formula is. If you're given two endpoints, then we can label those x1, y1. So this would be like x1, y1, x2, y2. Then we use our formula to put all of our information in, and we can solve for our midpoint here, okay? So going through a couple of these types of problems that you might see when we are working through this unit on Apex, I just want to remind you that you can use Desmos, and it's highly encouraged that you're using Desmos. And there's a simple way that you can put the midpoint formula into Desmos. So right here it says finding the midpoint using Desmos, and that's just our review. We just type in the word midpoint. Oops, if it lets me type in the right spot, sorry. So we type in the word midpoint, and then we have to start with a double parenthesis. And then I can look at my formula up here. So I have an example up here. So here's our example. -10 would be my x1. -9 would be y1. -8.2 is x2. And -7 would be y2. And so now I'm just going to take these coordinates here and plug them into my midpoint formula. So what this is saying when you put this in Desmos, it says find the midpoint, and then you're going to say find the midpoint of these two points here. So I'm going to put those in. Sorry, let me switch back over here. So it's going to be -10, comma, -9. Then I have to put a comma between them because I'm spacing out. So I'm literally just taking this and putting it in exactly as I see it. And then I'm going to put -8.2, comma, -7. And end that with double parentheses. Now, we can find it on here, and we can also hit label. So if we come here and zoom out, whoops, my screen just went crazy and zoomed way out. But if we come down here and zoom out, you would see that our midpoint should be -9.1, -8. So again, if we look at that down here, it just labels that midpoint, and we can put that up here on our line here. So our midpoint was -9.1, comma, -8. So that's what it's asking for when we're talking about just finding the midpoint. And remember, Desmos can be your friend here. Type in the word midpoint, parenthesis, and then you use your ordered pair. Make sure you have that double parenthesis or it won't work. So we're going to do one more example here using Desmos. So again, we're going to label these. I like to label that way I don't make any mistakes. So this is x1, y1, x2, y2. And when I label, it just makes sure that I have everything in order and ready to go. So when I go to type this in, I'm going to type the word midpoint down here, parenthesis, and then I start putting in my order pair. So I put another parenthesis, 4, comma, 2, parenthesis, comma, 3, comma, negative, and you're going to have to put your fraction in it here, -8/9. So remember, you can just use your slash button there, your almost like a divide button, to put your fraction in. It should take you without that extra parenthesis there. Let's see. There we go. All right, so then we're going to hit label. Whoa, undo that. Label. And then I'm going to try to find it here, and I'm going to scroll up a little bit so you guys can see. Here is our point, and I'm going to just write that in. So it's 3.5 and then 0.556. If you want to turn that into a fraction, 0.556. If you remember, if you hit this button here, it turns it into a fraction for you. You don't have to do that. Decimals are fine, but just make sure that if you get a decimal on Desmos and you want it into a fraction, you can type it in and it will change it for you. Only thing I would caution you of is that when you get into the quizzes on Apex, they might have it in fraction form and you might get a decimal form, so you might need to know how to switch that back. Okay, another type of problem that you can look at is if you're on a horizontal or a vertical line. And these are a little bit easier. You don't really need Desmos for these. There's a couple ways you can do this. So the first one here is talking about finding the distance between P, which is here, and Q, which is here. Now, since they're on the same line, there's both the same horizontal line here, we can do a couple things. We can literally count. So it would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So we could say that it would be 10 divided by 2. So 10 divided by 2 is going to be 5. So it's going to be 5 jumps in. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This would be our midpoint here at S. So that number would be -1. So our midpoint would be -1 or S. You could also just count in. So you could say 1 until they meet, and you can kind of see where they meet. So another example of that, let me get rid of this here so we can have a clean screen, is from R to P. So here's R at -14 and P. So the distance between these two is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I can think 8 divided by 2, and that's 4. So I'm going to count in 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So our midpoint would be -10. So if it's on a horizontal or a vertical line, you need to take you can find how far it is. So you just count, then you can divide by 2. So there's another way to do it if it's vertical or horizontal. If it's not vertical or horizontal, then your best bet is to use Desmos or the midpoint formula. Okay. So then the next type of problems that you're going to see are you are given 2 endpoints and you're asked to find a certain fraction of the way. Okay. So for example, here we have A and B, and you can label these the same way. So this would be x1, y1, x2, y2. Okay. You don't have to label them like that, but it's easier to kind of look at that. When it's again on the same straight line here, it is easier to work with than when they are diagonal or not on a straight vertical or horizontal line. So when we're working this way, we want to ignore ignore the ones that are the same. So here our 4s are the same, so I'm going to cross those out, and so I'm not going to worry about the y's, okay, because they're already the same. One way you can do this is you can count how far it is between the two. So you're kind of finding the distance there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So it's 12. If I wanted to divide this into 6, I would have them in groups of 2 because 2 of them, if I boxed in groups of 2, I would have 6 sections here. Okay, and then it wants 1/6, so it would be one of these sections. That's kind of one way to think about it. So my midpoint, or that point, not a midpoint. This is not midpoint here. This is just a point. The point would be at this point here. When you were going through your information, it shows you how to do this mathematically with a formula. To find that value, x or y, it's going to be x1 plus whatever your fraction is. So we call it k, so this is k, times x2 minus x1, which is kind of what we did here. We just did it more visually. So when I plug this in, for this formula, it's going to be x is equal to, my x1 is -3 plus my k is 1/6 times my x2 is 9 minus -3, my x1. Remember, 2 negatives in a row make it like a plus a positive. Okay. So when I combine stuff here, 9 plus 3, so 1/6 times 9 plus 3 is 12. If you think about this as its own problem, 1/6 times 12, and you think about it over 1, it's going to be 12 over 6. So 12 divided by 6, this reduces to 2. And then when I combine negative 3 plus 2, I'm going to get x is equal to negative 1. So again, I showed you a visual. This is the formula, and this formula can be replaced with x or y. So in this case, our x's are what we had to use to work with. If the x's were the same, then we would replace all of these x's with y's. So it would say y is equal to y1 plus k, y2 minus y1. So let's look at another example. This one doesn't give us the view or like the graph of it. We're just looking here at these numbers. So what are the coordinates of a point that is 2/5, so this is our k, of the way from A, which is 3, negative 2, to B, 3, 13. So again, I'm going to do x1, y1, x2, y2, excuse me. All right, in this case here, x1 is going to be the same, so I'm going to ignore these x's, and now I'm working with the y's. So my formula says y is going to equal y1 plus k, y2 minus y1. And remember, you can use Desmos for this. So if you don't like doing all the math and don't like seeing it up here, then once you plug in your formula here, ignore this and then just plug this into Desmos. So if you want to, when you replace this or substitute the numbers in, you can just plug this section into Desmos. So y is going to equal, y1 was negative 2, I believe. I think I crossed that out a little bit. Yeah, negative 2. Negative 2 plus my k is 2/5 times my y2 is 13 minus negative 2. Again, this changes to positive here. Sorry, that's a parenthesis. So y is equal to negative 2 plus 2/5. 13 plus 2 is 15. When you multiply this, I'm going to scoot this up just a little bit so we can see. When you multiply this, 15 times 2 is 30. 30 divided by 5, y is equal to negative 2 plus 15 times 2 is 30. 30 divided by 5 is going to be 6. So negative 2 plus 6, so y will equal 4. If it's asking the coordinates though, remember our x is going to stay the same. So my coordinate here is my x, it says the same, is 3, 4. Okay, same up here. I guess I should have gone over that as well. Excuse me for not. It's not just asking about the x, it's asking for the actual coordinates. If it was just asking for x, you'd put this answer. Since it's asking for the coordinates, the y stays the same, which I erased those, so I'm trying to remember what that was. There we go. So it would be negative 1, 4. So that's the actual coordinates. So the y would stay the same. In this case, the x stayed the same. Okay. Last one here. What is the location of a point on a number line that's 3/7? This is our k, of the way from A, which is 6, to B, which is 20. Now we're only given one value here. So we can just assume this is like x1, y2, or I'm sorry, x1, x2. Since we're not given a second value, we know this is on a horizontal line. So I can go ahead and find that answer here. So I'm going to let you try this one and then you can check my work. All right, so you should have gotten x is equal to 12. So once you put everything in, x should have been equal to 12. The last type of problem that you're going to see is where it's not in a horizontal line. That means the x's and the y's are both different. So you're still going to label it the same, x1, y1, x2, y2. We are just going to combine the formulas. So we're going to have to find the x value and the y value. So you're going to do the x is equal to x1, plus k, x2 minus x1, and you're also going to have to do y is equal to y1, plus k, y2 minus y1. So you're going to have to do both of them, and that's going to give your solution. So let's try this one and then check your answer. Okay, if you see here, I went through both processes, the process with both variables here, and then our ordered pair would be -1, 3. So that's your x and y. Below is another one for you to try, and I'll put the answer down in just a second here as a practice. So if you found that the point should be 0, 1, that would be correct. Let me know if you have questions.